So we're here talking to Jonathan Labrey, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of the International Integrated Reporting Council. Can you start us off by just telling us what integrated reporting is?
Yes, so integrated reporting is a response to the big megatrends that are happening in the world today. So we know from looking at the World Economic Forum's annual risks survey that the risk profile of the world has changed over the last 10 years. From a world that was dominated by financial risk about 10 years ago in the aftermath of the financial crisis. But the 2009 risks report shows that today's risks faced by most businesses are actually non-financial in terms of their risk profile. So they're to do with climate change, sustainable development, inequality. So just as the risk profile of the world has changed, so too we need our governance and our reporting framework to respond to that global change in the risk profile of the world. And at the same time, we know that our understanding of value creation has changed as well. About 40 years ago, the book value of most companies was a really good reflection of their overall market value. But today, because of the rise of intangible assets, which are difficult to account for in financial reporting terms, like intangibles such as brand, copyright, patents, the intellectual and human capital that now make up the lion's share of the value of companies, we just need a different corporate reporting framework to help companies to understand value and understand risk.
What are the challenges of using it?
The biggest challenge is that we live in a compliance mindset. Corporate reporting, when we speak to businesses about integrated reporting, which is a voluntary framework in most markets today, the first question we get asked is there regulatory support for this? Can we tell this story of value creation within our existing model of corporate reporting? Because so much of what we say to the world today, we have to say because it's decided by disclosure frameworks and standards that are mandatory. And so we're having to kind of break through 80 years or 100 years of compliance mentality to get to a situation where companies can tell their unique story of value creation, which is what we really want, and it's what investors want and what other stakeholders need as well in our society today. So I think that one of the biggest challenges is breaking through that compliance mindset and saying to companies that in many ways have lost control of their own message. We live in a world of massive and radical transparency where there are people every day writing about companies, their experience of companies, and that's affecting the reputation and the brand of the company and therefore the value of the company. What we're saying is that companies shouldn't just let that happen and not be in control of their own story. They should incorporate that and take ownership of the brand of their company and make sure that all of those capitals, the relationship capital, the social capital, are properly reflected in board decision making and thinking as well. So, we do think that businesses have a responsibility, but also a great opportunity to take back control of that information and communicate it in a way that really demonstrates that they are managing these risks and opportunities in a way that will create and enhance value in the future.
Does integrated reporting provide then a framework for businesses to tackle climate change?
Well, there's no doubt that climate change is the biggest existential crisis that's facing the world today and facing the business community. I was in Singapore recently, and the Prime Minister of Singapore had just made a speech at the beginning of September in 2019, and what he said was that climate change is no longer an environmental issue, it's an existential issue for the whole of our country. And I think that many world leaders now, leaders of countries, but also leaders in business and investment, recognise that climate change is a risk that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed at a system-wide level. And companies' action, but companies' accountability, and therefore corporate governance and corporate reporting are part of that. And the game changer in this conversation over the last 2 or 3 years has been the Financial Stability Board's work and the setting up of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD. And the speech that Mark Carney gave in the City of London about 4 years ago now, where he talked about the tragedy of the horizon, where there are risks that we're all aware of in the world, there are known risks, but maybe they're risks that are going to come down the line in 15 or 20 years' time. And he was using climate change as a known risk that we're all aware of, that is coming. Yet within our corporate reporting system, we're trapped in a disclosure horizon where we're only giving away information in the immediate future, in a year or 2 years' time. And therefore, he said that what we need is a reporting system that enables us to address that disclosure horizon so that boardrooms today and top management are truly taking into consideration the risks that are known to the world and actually allocating resources and making decisions about their strategy and business model, taking into account those known future risks. And so the TCFD made a number of recommendations that helps companies to start thinking about the impact of climate risk on their financial performance in the future. And integrated reporting, with its multi-capital mindset, natural capital, social capital, and so on, is a principles-based framework that helps companies to implement those TCFD recommendations. There are two ways that the accountancy profession will be impacted immediately. One is, I think, the role of the chief financial officer and the role of finance within business will evolve with integrated reporting, because what you're seeing is, and the World Economic Forum has done a lot of work on this, with automation and what they call the fourth industrial revolution, the introduction of artificial intelligence and robotics and so on, there are some professions in the world that are going to be really challenged in this new environment. And they think that there are certain parts of the accountancy profession that will become challenged as technology takes over the functions of some parts of the accountancy profession today. And so in order to stay relevant, the accountancy profession, I think, needs to look at where are the trends in their world that are going to impact on the profession, where are the opportunities to develop the skills of the accountancy profession in the future. And I think one of them is this idea of value creation, of the finance function becoming much more strategic within the business, becoming much more allied to the role of the CEO and the board of the company, becoming the eyes and ears of the CEO when it's thinking about the different resources and relationships and the strategy of the business. And our former chairman, a guy called Professor Mervyn King, has written a book called From the CFO to the CVO, from the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, to the Chief Value Officer. And is this not now the future role of the CFO in most of the larger businesses in the world? Is this not now the role of most CFOs in the world to actually become responsible for all the dimensions of value creation, not just the financial aspects of value creation? So I think from within a business, seeing that shift from financial value to broader value creation is one where the finance function has a real role to play there. I also think from a corporate governance perspective, the finance team working with the internal audit team, working with the company secretary, has a real role in getting the information through the business to the board so that the top management of the company can actually think about these different resources and relationships that the CFO and the CVO maybe in the future should be taking account of. The second major area of work where the accountancy profession is becoming so involved is the whole area of assurance. How do we ensure the credibility of this information? How do we ensure that the information coming out of businesses in the future, which will be multidimensional, how do we ensure that it's trusted by all the different stakeholders? And so assurance will play a major role in that in the future. And the accountancy profession, through the IIRC and others, is playing a major role in making sure that the profession is prepared for a new world of this multidimensional information, and where we can develop assurance methodologies so that the information coming out of businesses is trusted and credible and comparable, so that we're creating an information architecture that's fit for the 21st century.
It's a really revolutionary idea then. You really want to transform the entire way that we think about companies and their impact and their place in the world.
It's absolutely right that as we move to a world that is going to be enabled by technology, and as we move to a world where we now know the impact of business, it's now no longer controversial to say we know that the impact of business on society is, there are pluses and minuses in terms of the impact on society of business, that we need businesses to be accountable for that, and that we need to see corporate reporting not just in a vacuum, but actually as part of a broader system change that we're seeing in the world today. And you only have to look at the Deloitte Millennial Survey. Every year, Deloitte conducts a survey of many thousands of millennials, and they ask about their expectations of business. And what they say is overwhelmingly that they're very, very skeptical about the motivations of business. And that's driven in part because of annual reports, of reports of business. You read the business pages of newspapers, or you listen to the financial bulletins on the radio, and it's always about what happened in the quarter that's just gone. It's always about the financial performance of the business. And so it's no wonder that what we get from business quite often, our experience of business, jars with what we hear about business from the business pages of our newspapers and from the radio. And what millennials are saying is that that's building a kind of distrust between what they want from business. They want businesses to be part of society, and they want them to contribute to these challenges because they know that they've got an economic stake in the future of the country or the world, and they want this to happen. And so if businesses are going to stay alive and respond to this next generation, we're going to see the biggest shift in economic power over the next 30 years from the current generation to the next generation. And all the surveys show that this next generation have a different set of values, and that they're willing to move their money to the values that they have. Businesses have to respond to that. So yes, I think I wouldn't go as far as to say revolutionary, because I think integrated reporting is an evolution actually of the corporate reporting system as we have it, but it's certainly a response to all the signals that are flashing red in the world today to say we need change, and we need change urgently to respond to the pressing crisis of climate change, but also the next crisis, which is going to be about the fourth industrial revolution, about a technology-enabled world that we're unprepared for, and a world in which there is going to be this war for talent. So we need to understand intellectual capital and human capital and its relationship to financial capital. And integrated reporting is just that framework that helps companies to do that.
Jonathan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.